Tech, technology.
So I was flying with Santa, just sailing. And as we arrived at the North Pole, everybody was busy. Everybody was in action. It was amazing. There was some snowmen playing what looked like Pai Gow, although it might have been Go Fish. I'm not a snowmanologist. And I was like, wait a minute, are they gambling for money? Where do they even keep their money? And Santa was like, in a snowbank. Cha-ching! So we start walking through the crowd of snowmen, and I see one turn to the other, and he's like, hey, man, do you smell carrots? The other snowman was just grinning ear to ear. Santa said that's because the snowblower was coming around in a little bit, and he'd been, they have different rituals among snowmen. And, right then, Blitzen comes in and starts throwing down chips, getting cards, and I'm like, wait a minute, you don't care about the snowman and the reindeer cavorting? He's like, no, you know what you get when you cross a snowman and a reindeer? Frostbite. I was like, ooh, that's cold. He's like, no, stop, I make the bad jokes. And I was like, well, wait, what's even the difference between a snowman and a snow woman? And Santa was like, well, obviously snowballs. And I said, I thought snowballs was where they held their dances. And he said, no, seriously, you simply must stop. So just then, the elves came out and started singing Happy Birthday to Slarshy, which is one of the more famous snowmen. I'm sure you've heard of him. And, it was kind of weird that he shares his birthday with Jesus, but Santa reminded me that Jesus' birthday is actually in the summer. And so they all started singing, Freeze a jolly good fellow, freeze a jolly good fellow. So that was kind of neat. That was an interesting experience. And, I was like, gosh, I don't know how old he's getting, but he's looking a bit fat around the middle. And Santa was like, well, actually, in the summer, we send him to a fat farm. And I said, where's that? And he said, anywhere south of the Arctic Circle. They melt off pretty quick. And then a polar bear came by, literally walked right in front of us, wearing earmuffs. And I'm like, that's weird. A snow panda with earmuffs. What's that about? Yeah. And Santa said, well, they get cold. And I go, well, what do you even call a polar bear with earmuffs? He said, call him whatever you want. He can't hear ya. And I was like, oh, Santa, you're terrible. I dislike you strongly. Well, then Miss Claus wanders out, and she's a fine lady. She's got to be, I don't know, the hottest 75 you've ever seen. I mean, like Christy Brinkley in a few years hot. So I looked at her and I was like, hey, let's both be naughty this year and save Santa the trip. And she said, actually, I live here, you dumb bastard. Surely you should know that. And at this point, I'm starting to wonder, am I just in a hobo camp? Is this happening? And I was like, well, Mrs. Claus, is your name Jingle Bells? Because you look like you go all the way. She was like, well, I do, but normally only with Vixen. And there's a story behind that, but we'll get to it. So just then, an Elvine of elves rushed up to us, like the litany of subordinate clauses they were, grabbed us, took us inside. First thing I notice is a frog nailed to the ceiling. I'm like, what in the hell is that? Santa explained, that's a mistletoe. So we walked through the workshop. These elves are everywhere. Out of the thousands of them, only like 2 of them were making advent calendars. And I was like, well, why is that? And they said, well, the problem with advent calendars is their days are numbered. I said, I don't get it. And he said, a man tried to steal an advent calendar last year. I said, really? What happened to him? He got 25 days. So just then, there's a row of guys I see. And I say guys, they're elves, but I assume they're guys. I haven't really flipped any over to check their gender. And they're ripping up drum heads. And they're like, these ripped up drums are the best because A broken drum, you just can't beat it. Elves, man. Bunch of dicks. And then there was a bunch of elves taking the broken drums and painting kids' names on them, like Ukis, Uis, Orance. I was like, wait a minute. Those are clearly misspelled or Hawaiian. He said, no, they're not Hawaiian, and they're not misspelled. The thing about the Elven alphabet is it has no L. So without an L, Orance is just Orance. So we finally got to his throny do, and Santa agreed to do the interview. And that is where I head to the next segment.